Live now, Chair.
Thank you very much. Well, good morning, everybody, and I'd like to welcome you to this Planning Committee meeting, Newport City Council, 6th of October 2021. Before we start, I need to make an announcement. Today's meeting is being filmed for live and subsequent broadcast by way of the Council's internet site. The images and sound recordings may also be used for training purposes within the Council. As you will see from the agenda papers, generally the public seating areas are not filmed. However, by entering the meeting room and using the public seating area, you are consenting to being filmed under the possible use of these images and sound recordings for webcasting and/or training purposes. Both public speakers have been made aware of the broadcasting arrangements prior to this meeting. Would members please use their microphones to contribute to the meeting? And please remember to switch off the microphones when they have finished. Also, could you ensure that you refrain from using any mobile devices during the planning committee, and any mobile phones, iPads are switched off or on silent. Thank you very much. First item on the agenda is apologies, and I have two at the minute, Charles Ferris and Richard White.
I also have Councillor Tracy Hollyoak and Councillor Routley, Chair.
Tracy Hollyoak and Councillor Routley. Okay, thank you very much. The next item on the agenda are declarations of interest. If there are any members wishing to make a declaration of interest, and if so, on which matter, please? No? Thank you. Next item on your agenda, the minutes of the meeting held on the 1st of September 2021. It's on page 3 of your paperwork. And if I just ask first of all for accuracy, page 3, page 5. Would someone present then propose they were a correct record, please?
Yeah, true record there.
Yeah, I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you very much. All agreed? Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda then is the first planning application, item 1, which is application number 20-0617. The site is phase 2D Glanslyn, Llanwern. The ward is Llanwern. The ward members are Councillor Martin Kellaway. The presenting officer is Geraint Roberts. There are no public speakers, and the item is being presented to committee at the request of Councillor Kellaway. So if I could call on you, Geraint, to kick off. Thank you very much.
Right, thank you, Chair. I'll just load the presentation. Just bear with me a moment. Yeah, sorry for the delay, just bear with me. Right, thank you everyone. Can everyone see the display?
Yeah,
Yep.
Right, splendid, thank you. Sorry for that. Right, okay, 200617, Phase 2D Glanflyn Development Site, Queensway, Llanware, Newport. Just to briefly introduce it then, this is the introduction that's in your report, which you will have seen, but this is a reminder. The proposal is to provide 180 number dwellings and associated infrastructure and open space, including 4 local areas of play. The general layout is of a loop road from the avenue that serves a series of cul-de-sac side roads. A bridge links across Reen 1, the westernmost Reen, to Phase 2C, Bellway, and a footbridge will link eastwards into the Lovells phases, which are 3C and 4A. The houses are set out in a series of perimeter blocks and good frontage is achieved. Parking varies between garaging and driveway, frontage parking and parking courts. This application would normally be determined under delegated powers, but Councillor Kellaway has requested the matter is determined by the Planning Committee for the following reasons. And Councillor Kellaway said, could this be considered by committee, please, in light of the impact of flooding, drainage and highways infrastructure, in particular the impact of the levels and villages in the wider area. Okay, the key issues then, as listed in the report, are layout, highways issues and parking, the appearance, design and scale of the buildings, active travel linkages through the phase, landscaping and public open space, surface water drainage, which was of key interest to the local councillor. And then there are minor issues which relate to incomplete works elsewhere on the regeneration site, which I'll explain briefly at the end of the presentation, ecological net benefit to be achieved, and the construction environment management plan that's required. Okay, so in effect, then back to the presentation, what we have here is the blue hatched area shows you the phase. Effectively, the land to the west is currently being developed by Bellway, and we've granted approval for houses to the east for Lovells. Okay, so this is, if you like, a fill-in plot, and you'll obviously notice from the number it's been with us for some time. Okay, so just to confirm that location and where it is, this is the Glanflyn site, the former heavy end of the steelworks, Sputty here, the Eastern Distributor Road here at the bottom of the picture, and you can see the already developed areas of the site, and this is here, and the mainline railway running across the top, and the Tata service lines running in by there. Okay, so that's the location of our site, and this is the proposed layout. Now, the Avenue Loop Road we talked about is this main road here. So this road is the main road into the site. It will loop round eventually and join up with EDR at both ends, but currently it doesn't. But we do have an application in for those final stages of this road, which we're currently looking at. So you can see there is effectively a road in, loops round, comes out the other end. So these spurs effectively control the layout. And there are connecting roads. So one here is a formal standard road, and this is a shared surface which will be permeable to pedestrians and cyclists but won't be to vehicles. So effectively then we've got these perimeter blocks which face out onto the highways. So what we managed to achieve is a good level of frontage, and you can see effectively the houses face out either onto the highways or onto the drainage system which are running either side of the phase. So these blank corridors will contain reens and they will receive the surface water drainage from the site. Okay, so that is the broad layout, and we're satisfied with that in highway terms, in terms of tracking and also in terms of how it will function. We were very keen to get connectivity through this phase, and we think we've achieved it. So there are bridges here, you can walk through the shared surface, across onto this main avenue, over the bridge and into the Bellway phases. So we think this links efficiently into the areas around it. Okay, the school site is off to the south, very close by. The avenue, which will contain the bus services here. So in terms of general sustainability and the capability of the future residents to access local services, we think that is broadly speaking good. So we're satisfied with the layout, and that includes the parking provision, which is standard for this site. Okay, so they've reached the normal parking requirement that we have for them at Glanflyn, and they've tracked the roads and showed that they will work in terms of the service vehicles which will have to go there, primarily the bin wagon and a fire engine. So all of that is shown to work and we're satisfied with it. Okay, in terms of the detail of the layout, then the shared surface caused a little bit of toing and froing, but we've got this arrangement, and now obviously you can see it larger, you'll see how it works. So it'll be a non-standard surface, it will be at level, it won't be curbed, there won't be a designated footway, although there is likely to be an area which is, if you like, indicated for the use of pedestrians, but it will be a genuine shared surface. We're satisfied that it's quite short length, it has limited vehicle movement through it, and everyone who is using it will be people who live on it, so it's a cul-de-sac arrangement. Okay, in terms of the way the houses will work then, there are some parking courts which you can see here, but they're very limited in scale on this development, and we think that they're appropriate because what that allows us to have is more frontage. And just to explain that, I'll go on to the next slide. Because we have these parking courts, we can have frontage onto the roads instead of basically having a lot of dead curb line and a lot of parking. Okay, so we think this has given us better street scene, and it's given us opportunities for public realm planting like this avenue effect here. So we're satisfied that good planting can be provided across the site and good public realm achieved. Right, in terms of the scale of the building, they're basically 2-storey or 2.5-storey, and there's a limited range of materials, so brick, render, slate effect tiles, and there are, if you like, small but sort of architectural detailing which we're happy with in terms of detailing around the windows, for example here, the overdoor canopies and some cladding. So we're satisfied that the appearance of the buildings is adequate and will be attractive and lead to acceptable street scenes. So these are a little crop from the street scene drawings that were given, and I'll give you an indication of spacing and the opportunities for structural planting along this avenue, which we've already mentioned. So we're satisfied with scale and appearance. Okay, in terms of active travel, this little table has come from the 2021 active travel guidance, which is quite recent from Welsh Government. It shows cycling and road speeds which are acceptable. We're satisfied that within the phase, the road.
Excuse me, Chair. Sorry, can you just enlarge that a little bit more, please? Because I got a job to see it.
Yeah, no worries.
Thank
I'll
you.
make it a bit bigger if I can. There we are. Is that better?
It's a bit bigger now, yeah.
Too big now. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Enlarging it. This little table is quite interesting because it shows us what design speeds we ought to be working to for active travel routes. And basically, anything which is going to have mixed traffic, i.e. the bikes and the traffic are in together, needs effectively very low traffic volumes and very low speeds. So that's just an interesting guidance that's recently come out from Welsh Government in terms of what we should be working to. But overall, we are satisfied that the road system within this phase will give sufficient low speed and an appropriate environment for people to cycle through, i.e. low traffic volume, low speed, which is what we're looking. So effectively anything green is good for cyclists and anything orange or red is less good. So as soon as you get into high speed roads and high traffic volumes, most cyclists are discouraged. But overall, we're satisfied that active travel can be achieved within this phase. Okay, moving on then. We're going to spend a little bit of time on the drainage. Now, the phase we're looking at is this one here. Okay, and you can see that it's surrounded by reens. There's a big reen to the north, and there's reens either side of it, east and west, and then the frontage would be the Avenue Road here. Okay, now what happens on this site is that surface water drainage drains into the reen system, and then it runs off. Now, originally everything went south, and it went into this green channel here at the bottom of the slide, which is called the Mewed, or the main east-west ditch. Okay, commonly called the Mewed by Tata. And then it ran down here and it was pumped out to the Severn. Okay, so it was a completely independent drainage system. Water did come in from the north, so if you look at drain 3 here and drain 4, you can see that there was drainage being received into the site, but it was all cut off and diverted by the main east-west ditch and pumped into the Severn. Now, what we're going to get now is a situation where the water will run along this northern ditch and down to this area here, and then it will be pumped into the Monk's Ditch, which is this purple line on this slide. Okay, so that arrangement hasn't commenced yet because we haven't given St Modwin's permission to pump water into the Monk's Ditch. So right now, everything is still draining through the green channel, the main east-west ditch here in the south. Okay, and we're satisfied that the historic drainage arrangement for this site, the Tata British steel drainage system, which has been in place for many years, is still working, it's still adequate for the job. And we're also satisfied that the future arrangement has been shown to work. And once St Modwin's have demonstrated to us that the water generated on their site is sufficiently clean, then we can approve pumping to the Monk's Ditch. But that is not happening yet. So in terms of Councillor Kellaway's key concern, we're satisfied that the current surface water drainage arrangements, which are effectively the historic drainage arrangements, are adequate and will work. So overall, we're satisfied with the proposal and we advise that it can be approved because it's a reserved matters application and subject to some additional conditions, excuse me, beyond those which were applied at the outline. So as I say, the recommendation is approval. Right, thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Karen. Committee questions, please.
Yeah, sorry, Chair, I forgot to put my hand up. Yeah, I got a couple of questions, though, please. How many houses are actually going on the site, please, on that site there?
Sorry, Councillor, the whole site or the phase?
Just that phase one there.
The introduction said 180, but let me just double check.
But on the yeah, because on the proposal it's got 178. Is it a typo error?
Yeah, it's 178. What happened is that there was some slight changes in the layout, and so the proposal, the application description is correct. It's 178. So for clarity, it's 178.
Right. Yeah, because on section 1.3, it's got 180 dwellings.
Yeah, no, that's wrong. In the officer report. Let me find it now. There is a table because I normally put one in, which gives us the breakdown. Just bear with me for a moment. Get there in a minute. Yeah, paragraph 7.2 gives you the breakdown between bedrooms and the market housing and the affordable. It's definitely 178.
Okay.
Right. Also, yeah. Also on slide 8 you got as well. It's got the waste with the waste vehicle access, be able to get down that road, that sort of bit of that footpath into empty bins around that area.
Yeah, they've track tested it and they've shown the bin wagon can get in basically. On slide 8, at the top of that sort of hatched area, which is another area of shared surfacing effectively, there's some little squares just on the sort of right hand side of a slide, and that's effectively the bin drop. So what they've shown is that the distance that our refuse guys and the distance that the householders are going to have to move bins is within our recommended guidance in the supplementary planning guidance from waste management. So we're happy that the bin wagon can get in and everyone's drag distances for the bins are within acceptable guidelines.
Right. Okay. When you go back onto slide 12 as well, then, and like you said, the water runs into the main east-west ditch, and then the part then for the Monk's Ditch as well. Now, if they're going to build on that site now, they've already started building round by the phase of Lamwin Bull on that side. What part of that water does that flood into then? Does that part go into the Mute, or?
It all goes into the Mute right now. As I say, this is all the historic drainage system, which when they first developed Glanflyn, the plan was to continue to use the steelworks drainage, because why wouldn't they? I mean, it had worked efficiently since the works was built.
Yeah.
And I say that system effectively pumps all the surface water from Glanflyn and from the retained steelworks site out into the Severn. The pipelines come out down near Porton. So they had a workable surface water drainage system that was perfectly efficient and was working really well. I'd say Glanflame, what they want to do is pump into the Monk's Ditch, but they're not doing that yet. So right now, everything is still going out through the Tartar drainage system.
And would that be acceptable, or it's not going to put no pressure on the Mew then at the moment with the building still going on?
No, it's effectively the historic drainage system was culverts of the natural water courses through the site, and then they were all collected into the Mewed and pumped out. So obviously years ago when they built the works, they took this decision to install a completely new drainage system, which effectively divorced the steelworks from the natural drainage system that had existed on the levels before the works was built. It was completely independent, and it still is. So yeah, the pumping station is still there. Apparently there are 4 enormous pumps in there, and it pumps out the water through the steel pipelines down to Porton, and it still works. So there's no reason to think that the system that's been in place for decades is now ineffective.
Right, yeah, no problem. Thanks. Also, I just looked on 5.1 with the head of streets in the city service and waste managers here. There, it says from April the 1st, developers or owners, all new residential units are required to purchase the bins. I thought we actually supply the bins off if it's a new build anyway, or is that something that this is just new being brought in then? Is it this year?
I have no idea. I can only take the comment on face value. Apparently, if you buy a house in Newport, you have to buy your bins. But that's all I can say. I don't know.
Right. Okay. It's a bit. You're paying the council tax, and you got to buy your bins to put your rubbish in as well.
Yeah. I'm not going to disagree. Yeah.
Yeah. No problem. Okay. Thanks, Chair.
We would need an answer to that, councillor, from another department, I would imagine. Yeah.
Yeah, if anybody from street scene or city services on, by all means they can answer the question for me.
Yeah, we'll ask and find out, but on face value, yes, it says if you have to buy your bin, which does seem a bit harsh, but yes.
Okay. Any other member of the committee, please? Mark, are you indicating?
Sorry, Chair, I don't have a hand.
Chair, I've indicated to speak as well, but there we are.
I'm not. Well, oh yes, I got you now. Yeah. Well, if I go, the first one on my list is John Guy, and then Mark after John. Okay.
Okay, it's only going to be short, really. I've spent some considerable time reading the report on it. It's very detailed, and there's a lot of good points with it. The only thing that concerns me, and it's all about the drainage situation, and I can see that the historics and everything about that. Can we ensure in the future that this is monitored? It's all right for us to say this and that about what can happen or what will happen or the situation, but will it be monitored as time goes on? Because we realise the situation about the drainage, which the climate change and everything. Will there be somebody monitoring the situation for the future? Because we got a lot of building to go on there. That's the only Achilles heel that I see in this, in this actual application.
What the way that the drainage on Glanflyn is working is it passes into the hands of the management company, who are located down there. The management company looks after, if you like, the public areas of the site. So the public open space and the drainage system primarily are the parts of the site that they're dealing with. Okay, the roads, as I understand it, are put up for adoption and come to us as a local authority. So all well and good, but the rest of the site effectively is under private control. What we look to is that when we granted permission back in 2010, the applicant at that point demonstrated that there was an effective surface water drainage strategy available to them, and that was more or less carry on as we are. We will continue to use the British Steel drainage system, and that satisfied us at the time when we granted outline permission. In terms of the reserve matters approvals, when they come to us, we look at them and we consider them in terms of that overall drainage strategy and whether or not they're compliant with it. But effectively, we knew we'd approved 4,000 houses back in 2010, or up to 4,000, and we'd also approved, in principle, drainage through the private British Steel drainage system. And effectively, all we were looking for after that was compliance with what we'd already agreed. Okay, now the waters have been muddied a little bit because they've come in with this alternative drainage arrangement, which we have also agreed, but which has not yet been implemented. So we were satisfied initially that the British Steel drainage system was adequate to drain this housing site, and also we were satisfied subsequently that the Monk's Ditch could accommodate the drainage from this site as well. So effectively, planning applications are snapshots. You give us a development proposal, and at the time we determine it, it is considered acceptable within the circumstances that apply at that time. We don't, to get to the point, we don't really have a monitoring capacity long term. Okay, we just have to be satisfied that in terms of the technical appraisals made at the time of the application, that it can be done. And obviously the applicant has satisfied us at that time in 2010 that the drainage could be effectively achieved. Circumstances will alter, of course they do, over time, and when you think about, say, the flood defences that we have in Newport, they were adequate 50 years ago, now they are not. But obviously the people who control them, NRW, are looking to improve them as time goes by and avoid or negate the increased risks which are occurring because of rises in sea level and increasing storminess. So all I can say is, right now, we're happy it works. But 50 years from now, it's probably outside the remit of a planning system to deal with. That will be for whoever inherits the responsibility for these drainage systems. Okay, right now, the management company, potentially in the future, the council through its SAB powers. But what I'm saying is we have to deal with snapshots. We can future-proof things to some degree, but when you're talking long term, 50 years and longer, we have to assume the inheritor bodies will deal with new circumstances as they arise. So sorry, that was quite a laboured answer, but I'm not sure if I could shorten it.
Yeah, thanks for that. I accept the reasoning on that. Thanks very much.
Yeah, an interesting question and a concise answer as well. Right, Councillor Mark Spencer, please.
Thanks, Chair. It's just a quick question. The drainage system, you say it's a pump system which pumps out to the Severn. What if whose responsibility if that pumping system shuts down or it breaks down? And if it does, how long could it last for before flooding is likely to happen?
Yeah, that's a good question. My understanding is that the pumping station remains under Tata's control. It's theirs, and they have a responsibility to maintain it and make sure it continues to work. Clearly, it's in their own interest that it works because they want to drain their own site. What I can say is that Glanflyn, part of the overall strategy for the drainage is that there is storage built into the system. Okay, so if you go there, the reens are pretty big and they can fill up. They can accommodate a lot more water than normally would be in them. They're penned at a certain level, but that level could increase significantly if it needed to. They can hold much more water. The Western Park, for example, which some of you will be familiar with, it's just north of the Llanwen Bull. That's at a slightly lower level than the housing. That also is designed to fill up with water. It's designed to flood if it needs to. So they have significant storage capacity within their system, which means that if needs be, they can hold quite a large volume of water for quite a long period of time before we start to endanger the actual properties. There's enough contingency within the system, enough storage within the system that you would expect any mechanical failure to be rectified before the position becomes serious. Now, I can't give you chapter on verse on what that volume is, how long they can store water for, how long the pumps would need to be down before the situation becomes desperate. I can't give you any of that. That technical detail is beyond me, but I can give you that sort of pen portrait of the overall strategy, which is to say they can store water. There is contingency in the system. So it isn't if the pumps break, the place will flood in 5 minutes. That will not be happening. We would be talking days before it becomes serious.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Trevor Watkins.
Thank you, Chair. Sticking on the same, well, I got three issues really. Sticking on the same one, how much pressure are we putting on St Modwyn in regards to upgrading the Monk's Ditch to, how can I say, to accept that northern ditch into their into Monk's Ditch?
Yeah, when they came in with this proposal, we were a little surprised because they had a workable drainage system already, and it seemed odd they wanted to spend a lot of money building a new one when they had one. But nevertheless, that's their choice. Developers choose to build what they want to build, and we judge the acceptability of that under the planning system. That's how it is. So they said, we want to build a new ditch and we want to build a pumping station to pump the water into the Monk's Ditch. And we said, OK, fine, subject really to two things. One is, can you demonstrate that the Monk's Ditch can accept that quantity of water? And two, can you demonstrate that the water you're pumping off your post-industrial heavily contaminated site is clean enough? Because the Monk's Ditch goes into our SSSIs on the Gwent levels. So the water needs to be clean. What they basically said is they demonstrated that volumetrically the Monk's Ditch could cope. They needed to do a little bit of work on it in terms of some weirs and the telemetry that controls those weirs. But subject to that, it was fine. And the other aspect that they convinced us on was the storage capacity point, i.e. if the Monk's Ditch is completely full of water, we won't pump to it, and we don't need to, because we've got a huge amount of storage capacity within our site. So we'll wait for a couple of days until the Monk's Ditch goes back to normal, then we'll pump out. And we're like, OK, well, that's fine. You've demonstrated that idea works, should be fine. I think the real bugbear for them is meeting the water quality standard, and I think that's where they've struggled, and that's why they're not pumping to Monk's Ditch yet, because they're not able to show the water's clean enough yet. But volumetrically, in terms of the amount of water they want to pump in, they showed us it worked, and NRW agreed that it worked. And of course, Monk's Ditch is a designated main river. It's under NRW control. They're responsible for effectively monitoring it and controlling it in terms of what discharges into it. So volumetrically, yes, we're satisfied Monk's Ditch can take that water.
What concerns me, Chair, is the fact that, you know, the way we're going on, that Monk's Ditch will never be done. The next development comes along, we'll say the water goes into the Mew Ditch, and you know it never gets done in the end. So this is why I asked what pressure Newport City Council or NRW are putting on St Modwyn's to upgrade that Monk's Ditch. The other question is parking shared on that surface going through the development. I am seriously concerned about this particular thing, because when you got shared surfaces, issues arise. Prime example is going down Commercial Street where we have a shared service and it never works. There's accidents, there's parking on the road, and it doesn't work. So what restrictions are the developer putting in place to prevent unauthorized access to those shared surfaces? And the other thing is, as the main thing, why are we still developing on a floodplain? You know, it shouldn't happen. You know, when we get a development down in Caldecott or at St Bride's and ask for a development, they say no, floodplain, sorry. So why are we still developing on a floodplain? Those two questions, please, Chair.
Right,
Okay.
the shared surface, obviously we have to look at it and be satisfied that it can function effectively. We don't have any rock solid guidance on what a shared surface should be and what it shouldn't. So we're almost treating them on a case-by-case basis. But in terms of rule of thumb, we look at the length of them, i.e. short, and we don't like them to be through roads for obvious reasons. Okay, so the only people who will be using this shared surface will either be the people who live on that road or people who are making deliveries there. Okay, no one else will go down there because you can't go anywhere. Okay, you get to the end of it, all you can do is turn around and come back out. So there'll be no rat running down there because it doesn't go anywhere. Okay, so we know it's short, we know it serves a very limited number of houses, we know that no one can go through it, and also because it's the road you live on, you will drive according to that knowledge. Okay, there's a degree of social control. As soon as anyone drives inappropriately, the other people on that road are going to say, slow down, stop it, my children play on this road, don't do that. So we're satisfied that in terms of the layout of it, there's some localized narrowing, it's got horizontal deflection in it. Okay, it's wide in some sections so that people can get by it. We're talking about applying a condition to get the constructional detail so we can have an idea about, if you like, the pedestrian refuge that's proposed, the area which will be slightly differentiated to give drivers a visual cue that they can expect people to be on that area. All of that is controlled. So we're satisfied that that road, short length, no through road, limited numbers of people accessing onto it, horizontal deflection, even the surfacing, if it's done in the right way, you know, block paving as opposed to say tarmac, which makes a noise, which again slows people. All of that operates to make this a safe space that people and vehicles can transit through. Okay, because the whole idea about a shared surface is changing driver behaviour. Yeah, it's not a road for cars, it's a street for everyone. Okay, so people have to adjust the way in which they drive. Yeah, so they can't drive at high speed, they have to give priority to everybody else rather than to motor vehicles. And in certain circumstances that can work. Okay, and we think this is one of them. So we're satisfied that the shared surface will work and it will make a safe space for people to move through. Okay, people and vehicles to move through. In terms of flooding, we're presented with a fait accompli down here. Permission is granted. It was granted in 2010. Okay? Permission is in place. The council has granted an outline permission. So when we granted that permission, again, snapshot in time, we were told these are things that need to be done to mitigate flood risk in this area. The risk was known at the time, and the developer said we can mitigate it and make it an acceptable level of risk. Okay, it's still a floodplain, the risk doesn't disappear, but it can be reduced, it can be made acceptable. And part of that was in raising the site. Okay, so the site is to be raised across the whole scope of it. It's an enormous operation, but it is being done. And also part of a flood defence was this storage capacity point that we raised in terms of surface waters, because that storage capacity doesn't just work for surface waters, it also works if there is a risk of tidal inundation, which there is if the event the flood walls on the Usk or on the levels were to fail. Okay, so again at 2010 they came to us and said, in the event of flooding, this is what we will do to mitigate the risk, and we found that to be acceptable and we granted permission. So permission is in place. We need to test that the reserved matters approvals accord with that overall strategy, accord with that overall permission, and we're satisfied that they do. So we're not granting permission for houses on the levels. We did that 11 years ago.
Okay, thank you, Byron. Okay, Councillor Watkins. Yeah.
Not really. I disagree with Karen on a number of things, but obviously the things have been dealt with.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Any other councillor? Councillor Jordan.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just going back to on page 26, where I did mention about the access to the vehicles, everything else. It's got a refuge vehicle thing there. It says even with 5.418, shown around the plot 137, it does not appear achievable that vehicles can turn adequately around there.
What's the paragraph number, councillor?
5.418. The drawing in this pedestrian vehicle visibility display shows access for a refuge vehicle. However, the turning of the vehicle shown adjacent to plot 137 does not appear achievable.
Oh yeah, right, got that. Yeah, this is the highway comment. What I've put in is the tracking drawing. So underneath paragraph 5.418, that's the actual tracking drawing for the bin wagon. In my mind, it shows that the wagon can turn, and it is achievable.
Right, okay. Also, was on 5.424 with the parking, Newport City Council SPG parking standards says, with the parking area, it requires 513 parking spaces, but all they got is 456. So there's a shortfall of near 44, 57 spaces.
Yeah, what's happened down in Glantlin, and when I said in our presentation, they met the normal expectation for parking. What we did is we accepted that Glantlin would become a sustainable community in due course. So when they started building it, there was nothing there, no school, the bus service hadn't started. Effectively, there was nothing, no Llanwen Bull, nothing. It was just houses. Now, what that meant is effectively 1 parking space per bedroom up to a maximum of 3 spaces. That's what our parking standard says. No sustainability reduction possible. There was nothing there. But they said, yeah, but there will be things there, and you know that they will be coming because you can control their delivery through the Section 106 legal agreement and through the infrastructure phasing plan. And we're like, that is a fair point. So we know there will be a bus, we know there will be a school, we know there will be sports facilities, we know there will be, a pub and a shop and a this and a that. So they said, can we move away from that parking standard a little bit? And we said, well, all right, what do you want to do? And he said, well, for smaller 3-bedroom houses, can we just deliver 2 spaces instead of 3? And we said, well, that seems reasonable in the context of your argument. So we basically agreed that smaller 3-bed houses can provide 2 spaces instead of 3, and that's where the reduction is. And that is because we know this site will become more sustainable as time goes by.
But on the main plan itself, the actual main site plan, which was presented to Newport City Council about years ago, there were ideas there of putting shops, a school, a pub, everything else on that plan itself. So how come now they've sort of alleviated off a little bit more then because of that? Then because they knew it was going to have a pub because the massive size of the development was that big. They knew there was going to be a pub, a school, everything else, and shops maybe on that site. So they knew there was going to be room for vehicles. So how come now it's sort of like changed around a bit? They're going back on your SPG for the parking standards.
Well, the reason why we let them depart from a parking standard is because we knew that the site would become more sustainable. And what the SPG says is if you're in a sustainable location, you can provide less parking because people don't need to drive everywhere. They can walk, cycle, or catch the bus. So we said, yeah, all right, we accept that. Your site isn't sustainable now, but it will be more sustainable in the future. And we know it will because we can basically make you do it. Because you signed a legal agreement saying that you would deliver it. So we agreed that they could depart from the parking standard a little bit, but not much. Now, there are facilities down there increasingly, as members are aware, that the pub is in, the school is in, the bus route is in. Now, not everything is in. There are other things which are to come in terms of the clinic and a shop and the sports village. There are lots of things which have not been provided yet. But they basically couldn't be all front loaded. We couldn't really expect them to build everything and then build the first house. We needed to kind of meet them halfway on that, and they needed to meet us halfway on that. So what we have is this phased delivery of these facilities and an improved level of sustainability on Glantlin as time goes by. So it was very unsustainable at the start. It's less unsustainable now, and it will become more sustainable in the future. So we felt we could give on the parking provision for those reasons. but only a little bit.
Right, okay, thanks. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Anyone else? No? Does someone want to propose something, please?
Chair,
Yeah, Councillor.
can I propose that we accept the recommendations on the report?
Okay.
Officers' recommendations.
Is there a seconder?
Yeah, I'll second, Chair.
Thank
Councillor
you. So it's been proposed and seconded that we accept the officer's recommendation, which is approval with conditions. Could you organise the votes, please, Pamela? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Guy, can I have your vote, please?
I'm for the officer's recommendation on the planning application.
Okay, Councillor Clark,
For.
Watkins, go to Councillor Jordan.
Yeah, against.
Against. Councillor Spencer, please.
For.
Councillor Watkins.
He's got his mic turned off.
Yeah.
Yes, I have. Sorry, John. Sorry, Chair. Reluctantly for.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor. And yourself, please, Chair.
Yeah, for the officer's recommendation.
That's 5 for and 1 against.
Okay.
So that's
Harry. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, Pamela. Thank you, committee. We now move to item 2 on your agenda, pages 39 to 70. It's application number 21-0293. Site is Llanwern Village Development Site, Phase 1, Cot Hill, Llanwern. Now, the ward is Llanwern. The ward member is Councillor Madin Kellaway. And the presenting officer is Grant Hawkins. This item is being presented to the committee at the request of Councillor Kellaway. Thank you, Grant.
Thank you, Chair. I am having some issues the last sort of 10 minutes. I can't actually see anyone, so can you all see me okay?
Yes, I can see you.
Brilliant.
Yep.
That's fine. I'll talk to the black screen in front of me, but as long as you're all there, that's the most important thing. And I'll share my screen. Right. Okay. Let's close that a second. Okay. Screen. Okay, brilliant. Right, sorry about that. So this application, 210293, which is a reserved matters application at the Llanwern development site on Cot Hill. The application is reserved matters for 75 houses, 75 homes, associated infrastructure and landscaping pursuant to outline permission 160864, which is a residential development for up to 1100 dwellings and provision of other infrastructure, which is listed: primary school, village centre, public open space, landscaping and associated infrastructure works. The application is also applying to partially discharge a number of conditions as listed there within the description. Let's pop up to the blue line plan. So as you can see here, we've got Cot Hill, which runs through from west to east. The application area is to the north of Cot Hill, dogs round left towards the west behind existing dwellings on Cot Hill. This is an aerial view. So this is the southern development area to the south of Cot Hill. Phase 1 has been built out. Phase 2 has also been built out, but obviously this is an aerial image from earlier this year. Phase 3 has been approved down here. We've had some attenuation ponds approved down here, and we've had an over 55s development approved here. So now the application is proposing to break through into the northern part of the site. This is the first residential application that we've had, was first reserved matters application for houses to the north of the site. So it's the first one, and it includes the access into the north. So the concept master plan, so condition 1 of the outline permission requires details for the access, appearance, landscaping, layout and scale, i.e. the reserved matters, to be obtained from the local planning authority for each development parcel, and these should accord with the principles and parameters of a design code which was approved in 2018. So this is the concept master plan for that design code. So this sets out how we anticipate development parcels will come forward in the future, and this yellow area identified here is zoomed in, and this is the area that we are considering within this reserved matters application. So here's just a few photos of the site as it currently is. This is stood on Cot Hill, and the access will be located here going north into the site. As you carry on north into the site, there's an area here which will be open space, and we'll look at within the proposed site layout shortly. As you go through left through the gap in the hedgerow here, we come over to the west of the site, and as we stand on sort of the southern boundary of the site, we're looking sort of northwest and north. The site is approximately 3.49 hectares in size. It's existing agricultural land, agricultural fields. So the key considerations of the application will be the compliance with the approved indicative master plan and design code documents, the assessment of the design and appearance and placemaking considerations, the amenity of the future residents of the scheme, as well as the amenity of the existing neighbouring residents, matters of parking and highway safety, drainage, landscaping, trees and ecology, and noise. So this is the proposed site layout. So as I mentioned, the site is approximately 3.49 hectares in size. We start off by the road structure continues north, then it heads and doglegs west along the top boundary of the site. So this broadly follows this sort of red area, which is the green boulevard area in the design code and the master planning of the site. So effectively, this is the main vehicular highway which will run through the site, and it will link round in a big loop, head back through and link back down. And then off there will be secondary areas of housing, tertiary roads and smaller, more residential streets and cul-de-sacs. So what we're looking at today, this sort of dogleg area here, is coming up here, and then it's this yellow area here. So it's broadly based on a perimeter block approach. So all dwellings on the outside edges of the site will face onto the public highway. So there'll be active surveillance of these public realm areas. The frontage will be active on corner locations such as this plot here. There'll be dual frontage, so we don't have sort of blank elevations facing onto the public realm, onto public areas, which from a placemaking point of view is obviously a positive, because we don't like to see blank elevations fronting onto main routes. As you access the site, there is an area of green space, as you can see here, and there are 4 dwellings that overlook this green space. Originally, there were an additional 2 dwellings sort of in this area, and these 4 houses were pushed further down, restricting the size of this green open space. An important consideration for the sort of green boulevard, in order for it to accord with the design code, is that it should create a nice green corridor through the northern part of the site, creating an overall verdant character, providing an attractive approach through the development, reinforcing the garden village approach for the overall site. So for us, a key part of this scheme was making sure that this open space is informal but serves a purpose in terms of informal recreation for residents, not only of this phase but of the wider phase. It's one of the first things that you will see as you break through into the north of the site. So we really wanted to make sure this was high quality and accorded with the design code. So the original plan that came in didn't accord with the design code in our opinion, and as a result of negotiations with the developer, 2 houses were reduced from the scheme, removed, sorry, and these 4 houses were pushed back with their driveway pushed back, really to open up this space. And what it's done is provided a nice area for planting, for residents to use, for scrub mix planting for ecological gain, and also now provides a 3-metre wide cycle and footway that links through the site and travels north and will carry on into further phases of development. That's on the overall master plan for the site, so that is something that we will be expecting to see as part of further phases moving forward. This cycle route and footway is a good active travel route. It will be the main pedestrian route through the site, linking up different phases, and it will link up nicely with the existing redirected public right of way and green area, which is located to the south in the previous phases and has actually been built out now. You can see that on site if you go to site. So it creates a nice network, a green corridor running through from south to north throughout the wider development. Moving over to sort of the western side, as you can see, there is a link here, which creates a permeable link for residents and users of the footway and cycleway, links into the western part. We've got some smaller residential streets, which are, this is a green lane. It's one of the approved residential streets as part of the original design code. And the design and layout of this is compliant with the green lane as per the design code. So as you can see, there's some smaller trees planted either side, creates quite a nice environment. There's some turning heads and shared areas there. And as you can see, sort of properties are generally quite nicely laid out with spacious gardens, suitable distances between properties, providing tandem parking and areas of parking to the west here in a small court. I should mention that on the main vehicle route coming through, as you can see, there's plenty of structural tree planting. This is part of the design code, which specified there must be structural planting to create the boulevard feel for the main route through the site. So we're satisfied that there's a good opportunity there to create a very strong visual amenity and create a good sense of place, contributing towards placemaking considerations. So finally then, we've got 4 houses which overlook a private drive to the north of the site. Again, further to the northwest here will be another phase of development, but this is shown in the design code as being a locally equipped area of play and open green space. So it'll be quite pleasant for these properties to overlook there and open up that space that will be further to the north to create a pleasant overall environment. That covers that. So that covers sort of the general layout. We'll go through some of the more specific points in due course. There's some illustrative street scenes that have been submitted here by the applicant. So if we perhaps look at street scene C, which is this one at the bottom first, this is the main boulevard road running along the northern edge of the site. So again, as you can see, there's properties fronting onto the main road. There's visual indications of the tree planting to the front with the parking. And then street scene B is the green lane that runs through here. And again, you can see the sort of the variation of house types, planting, separation between dwellings. And then A is those 4 houses that I mentioned that overlook the private drive to the northwest and will overlook a future phase of development, which will include open space. The next slide just looks at a sample of the house types. There is a few more house types included within this phase, but these have just been picked out just to give you an idea of sort of the materiality of the frontages, the mix of brick and render, the timber cladding, tiled roofs, etc., and the different roof forms, which when combined together across the scheme create a nice variation, a sense of sort of place and environment, and a good mix of different house types and styles. These are part of the Red Row Arts and Craft range, which is what is being included within all the phases of development within the wider site. So hopefully that just gives you a bit of an indication as to what we're looking at with those. So one of the considerations that we need to be mindful of is the impact of the proposal and the relationship with existing properties. So these are the properties located to the north of Cot Hill. These have been there obviously a little while now. They've all got long, deep gardens. They range from sort of 31 metres to 36 metres or so in depth. So in terms of the impact of the development, they're obviously set at quite a distance back. So the new dwellings SPG would look at any windows that in elevations that are facing each other should be 21 metres. As you can see, we're far in excess of 21 metres. So in terms of privacy between properties, we don't anticipate that as being an issue. The gardens of these new dwellings will be approximately 10 metres in depth, which again accords with the SPG to prevent overlooking between properties. There's two side properties here which face side onto these properties. Again, there's an existing depth of approximately 30 metres or so. These side elevations, whilst fairly close to the boundary, will not have any windows in, which will cause overlooking. And they're of a design with a hipped roof, so they're relatively, the hip roof sort of takes the massing of the buildings away from the boundary. There is proposed to be close board fencing along the perimeter of the site, along the backs of these gardens, which will prevent overlooking at ground level between the existing and proposed properties. That's been agreed as part of the application. There's existing hedgerow which will be retained and will be bolstered. We're recommending a landscape management plan for the overall landscaping of the site as part of a condition. So obviously we will be able to agree with our consultees the management of these to make sure that obviously they are bolstered and they are serving an amenity purpose. What I am suggesting, I'll come to it a little bit later on, but I'll just touch upon the officer's report didn't recommend a condition in relation to screening during the construction process. So what I have added to this presentation and would put to the committee is that we recommend a condition for boundary screen to be installed prior to construction of development on site. I've got the wording of that condition. I'll run through that a little bit later in the report when we get to the recommendation. So overall, we're satisfied that existing residents, there will be no demonstrable harm to their residential amenity. These photos, sorry, just show the this is the rear boundary, so you can see some of the hedgerows and trees. The properties along Cot Hill are located behind here. You can sort of see there's some views sort of through in between trees and hedgerow, but broadly speaking, there's quite a fair bit of vegetation there which we've managed and maintained as part of the landscaping of the scheme. In terms of future amenities of residents, this is just a snapshot showing some relationships. Existing properties, there's 21.5 metres there. We would expect to see 21 metres between habitable windows that are facing each other. And again, they've got the garden depths of 10 metres, 11.5 metres. So this is consistent over the scheme. There's fencing locating between properties. That's 1.8 close boarded fencing. And then boundaries to properties in public facing locations. This blue line, that's a brick wall, so it's a higher quality boundary treatment. So we're not sort of seeing close boarded fences in publicly visible areas, which all contributes to creating a nicer place and a nicer environment for residents and passers-by to pass through. So in terms of the landscaping of the site, I'll look at the landscaping plan in sort of two sections. You can see this open green area here, which will be used by residents sort of informally. There's tree planting, there's native scrub mix planting here for ecological enhancement. These orange lines are native hedgerow being proposed to sort of green up the boundaries of the site, the frontages of properties, for example. So again, you can see the double tree planting either side of the highway. So overall, it creates for a pleasant environment. Along this green corridor, there are swales. So not only will these act as drainage features, they're actually rich in biodiversity benefit, and a lot of the time they will actually be dry. So again, they are sort of informal recreational users for, you know, for children playing or people walking their dogs, etc. Over to the western side, this is more sort of the residential street. You can see that there's green frontage and planting along the highway. There's again hedgerows proposed on corner locations, and then there's obviously the general garden spaces. So what we've got over the west here, we've sort of negotiated the change of this boundary with the tree officer. Originally the fence was going right up to the boundary underneath these trees. As you see, these purple lines or pink lines are the protection areas for these trees. So what we've actually agreed is that these are set in from the site to create more of a sort of a breathing space, I suppose, for the landscaped edge, for the woodland edge. And again, this proposed scrub mix planting along these boundaries, which again will be secured via condition. In terms of ecology, the site itself, because it's got a lot of hedgerows and things like that are existing, it has been considered suitable for dormice, which are a protected species. There's been existing surveys at the site over the years which hasn't brought any records of dormice, and more recently a survey has been undertaken. Natural Resources Wales have requested a dormice conservation strategy to be submitted, which the applicant has submitted. This does include the survey which shows that there is no records of dormice from that survey. It also includes mitigation and enhancement measures, because whilst none were found, the habitats are suitable for those dormice. We are awaiting a final response from Natural Resources Wales. We were hoping that it might have come in just before planning committee, but we are waiting that to come in, and it should be in within the next few days. So what I'll get to at the end, but what we are recommended is that delegated authority is given to the head of regeneration, investment and houses to approve the application, if that's the way that the committee chose to go, if we get a no objection from Natural Resources Wales in the next few days. Similarly, there were 2 trees being removed within the site which have been identified as having potential for bat roosts. More recent surveys that have been submitted recently have shown that there is no bats present on those trees. An assessment, sort of an ecological assessment of those trees has been submitted, and it's identified that measures such as soft felling of these trees would be undertaken as a precaution. And also they're proposing bat roosting bricks have been incorporated into the houses on the scheme, and we've recommended a condition in relation to bat roosting bricks to make sure that we're happy with how many there will be, where they'll be located, and just obviously to make sure that they are retained moving forward in the future. Again, we've gone back to Natural Resources Wales in relation to that, and obviously we are waiting their imminent response. So we're hopeful that there won't be any issues, because obviously there are no records of those species being found. But yeah, that'll obviously be subject to Natural Resources Wales being satisfied with that as well. So if we move on to sort of highways and parking, the roads that have been proposed are compliant with the design code. So the hierarchy of roads, their layout and the specification of those roads, the widths, materials, etc., have all been agreed via the design code, and we've assessed the proposed layout and are satisfied that they accord with that design code. So we're satisfied from that point of view, which moves us on to parking. So there's obviously 75 units altogether. 60 of those units are private dwellings. 60 of those units, which are private dwellings, all accord with the parking standards. They all have the relevant spaces to the relevant number of bedrooms. There are then 15 affordable housing units within this phase, as identified within these red dots in the western corner of the site. Now, some of these houses, some of them are flats, so they'll take on the appearance of a terraced house, but they're actually a ground floor and first floor flat. 12 out of these 15 affordable units are deficient from the parking standards by 1 space. So 3 of them have got the spaces in accordance with the parking standards, 12 of them are 1 space short. So 84% of the total units within the site are strictly compliant with the parking standards. 16% are one space deficient. Planning Policy Wales states that parking standards should be applied flexibly and allow the provision of lower levels of parking and creation of higher quality development. So we've taken the approach here that we could, if we were to ask for an additional 12 spaces, so one space for each of those 12 units, what we would end up with is either losing affordable housing units to accommodate that parking, which there's clearly a need for affordable housing units, so we didn't want to lose those. There's also a requirement for the scheme to come forward with a certain amount of affordable housing units, so we'd be less than that if units were taken out. Secondly, we may have to lose landscaping areas, which again would dilute the quality of the overall scheme. And not only that, in diluting landscaping and increasing parking will create a more sort of parking dominated, vehicle dominated layout, which in terms of providing an overall high quality of scheme, we think that would be to the detriment of that. On other phases of development within this site, for affordable housing units, we have accepted a one space deficiency in some areas. So in terms of the consistency, we would be consistent with that approach. So there's also the fact that the Section 106 requirement for this site confirms and sort of controls the addition of the village centre, which will provide services, units, and also a school. So in terms of the overall sustainability of the site, as those come forward, the sustainability of the site will increase. So on balance, we consider that even though there is a short under provision for the affordable housing units, this isn't harmful to the overall scheme, and the approach is consistent with what we've had previously. In relation to visitor parking spaces, these are indicated on street, as you can see here. These will be a very informal arrangement. The Green Street, for example, will have spaces on the road that is being agreed as part of the design code. We find that on these residential streets, if we start sort of putting in formal visitor spaces, they'll often get privatised by dwellings, and then they're not available for visitors. So we're comfortable with the approach to visitor parking on street, that will be acceptable. Obviously, I touched upon the affordable housing provision in relation to parking, but yeah, there's 15 out of 75 units will be affordable housing, so that equates to 20%. The Section 106 agreement for the overall site, so for the up to the 1100 houses, will require 20% to be affordable. So if you take that in isolation as part of this phase, it is compliant with that Section 106 agreement. As I sort of touched upon earlier, there'll be 8 2-bedroom affordable flats, 5 2-bedroom affordable terraces, and 2 3-bedroom affordable terraces. So we're happy with the mix, and we're happy with the provision that will be provided on site. So this takes us on to the next 2 conditions which are being sought for approval. The first one is condition 19, which is noise. So the outline planning permission for the overall site identified that a noise survey needs to be submitted for this area. I've sort of broadly marked in purple here to make sure that there is no harmful impact in relation to the Southern Distributor Road, which obviously is a main road which links the M4 down towards sort of Newport Retail Park and into the wider city. So what that noise survey has shown is that there are a number of facades along this western boundary, as identified in purple, that if windows were open, those rooms would be exposed to noise, which would be above the recommended amount. So the noise survey has indicated that via trickle vents within the windows, they would ventilate the rooms sufficiently, and they would, in terms of ventilation, that sort of, it would be to a building regulation standard of that, and that would be fine. However, we've got concerns that during periods of warm weather, for example, in the summer, predominantly, residents would be, they would really want to open their windows to allow sufficient cooling of these rooms. That would then expose them to road noise. So whilst the breach of the noise is not enough to be worried about, in terms of the principle of development, it can be achieved. It just would need some form of mechanical ventilation. So we haven't had the details of those mechanical ventilation. So that is why we are not recommending that this condition is discharged. So what we would expect is the applicant to come back in to discharge this condition separately, give us the details of the mechanical ventilation for these facades marked in purple, and then obviously, providing we're happy with that detail, we would then discharge that condition. So we are recommending that condition is refused. This moves me on to condition 12, which is for drainage. So this is a very small snapshot of the layout for drainage. It's example, so we've got the main highway that runs through here, and basically what we've got is a surface water drain which runs underneath the highway. There's a swale here, for example. If this collects water, that'll be linked into the surface water drain underneath the road, as will the rain gardens, as will any highway drains. So they will link into the main surface water drain for the site, and then that will continue south. So we are here with this phase, so it will link into this main road, continue south, and then it'll go beyond through the main infrastructure network for the road layout. It'll carry on south to these attenuation ponds here. So, as you may recall from previous applications on this site, there's been issues with drainage insofar as these drainage ponds have not been constructed. They've not been agreed at the point of the last application which came to this committee. Since then, we have agreed the details of the drainage ponds, the attenuation ponds, Pond A and Pond B, and they are under construction. So they are not complete and in operation yet. However, they're under construction. Because they're not in operation, we're not recommending that the drainage condition is discharged today, because ultimately what we haven't got are attenuation ponds which are in work, in motion, working. So what we are proposing is what we proposed previously for applications at this site, that the surface water for construction drainage is approved by a conditional discharge with officers before any work starts on site. So basically, how is that surface water during the construction phase going to be managed? So we'd expect to see a scheme of that. And then in relation to sort of the development, we're saying that no hard surfaces shall be provided until such a time that a contract to construct the attenuation ponds that the phase relies upon has been awarded to the contractor. Well, clearly a contract has been awarded to the contractor because they're developing on site, they're developing the ponds right now. So what we would like is confirmation of that contract and the timescales for the completion of that contract. So that will give us the confidence of who's doing it and when is it going to be completed by. And then once we know that, and once we've agreed that that is a satisfactory timescale for the implementation of these ponds, we will then allow hard surfaces to be carried out on site, because we know that they will be linking into the attenuation ponds within an agreed timescale. So those are the two additional drainage conditions that we are requesting, but we are not recommending discharge of condition 12 for the drainage of the site. I talked earlier on about a proposed condition for the means of enclosure to screen construction works to be installed along the rear boundaries of the properties, the existing properties along Cot Hill. So this is the recommendation of that condition there. So prior to commencement development, the means of enclosure to screen construction work shall be installed along the rear boundaries of the properties located on Cot Hill that back onto the site. And that's in the interest of protecting the amenity of neighbouring properties whilst construction works are ongoing. So the overall summary of is that the scheme provides affordable housing in relation in line with the Section 106 agreement. There's good pedestrian links and movement through the site to encourage sort of active travel between phases and into the wider area. There's good informal recreational opportunity and within the proposed green spaces. There's good links to the future village centre, school and other green areas. I won't go through each of one of those, everything that I've sort of gone through within the course of this application, but we are satisfied with the overall layout and with the overall proposal. So, as I mentioned earlier on, there's two outstanding issues that we are expecting Natural Resources Wales to get back to us on in due course. Hopefully it'll be this week, we've been advised, but it may be next week. So what we recommended is delegated authority is given to the head of regeneration, investment and housing to issue a decision to part approve with conditions and part refuse the application on receipt of a no objection from Natural Resources Wales. So if Natural Resources Wales come back and they just need some minor tweaks to one of the submitted reports, for example, then we could agree that with the applicant and approve the application. If they come back saying no objection is absolutely fine, then we can use our delegated powers to approve the application. Whereas if they come back with an objection and there's an issue, then we will have to resolve that with the applicant, and then we will have to bring the application back to the planning committee for approval or for consideration. So overall, we're recommending the reserved matters and these conditions are approved, and then we're recommending refusal of the drainage and the noise drainage condition and the noise assessment condition as mentioned previously. That's everything. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Grant. Thanks for the presentation. Committee, Councillor John Guy is indicated, then Councillor Jason Jordan.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. Two questions not related. The first one, could you clarify the types of affordable housing? It's just that I'm not absolutely sure what the specifics on affordable housing. If you could just clarify that. And the other one is, are we satisfied that in view of the problems before with the drainage situation about these ponds and everything, we satisfied that we can get these developers into line with that, because there has been problems in the past. That's my questions.
Yeah, thank you.
So in relation to the affordable housing, obviously what they've shown us, what they will be is obviously a mix of flats, two bedroom flats and 2 and 3 bedroom terrace properties. We just know that there will be affordable housing. We know that that is controlled within the legal agreement, but we have no I don't have information in relation to sort of that 10-year type. That will be, I believe Redrow will be providing that. I don't think it's like a social housing provider such as like the previous older person's home was on this site. So that's what I can say in relation to that. In relation to the drainage, what we would, I suppose the issues that we've had with this one is obviously that we've had to take enforcement action, because obviously they've commenced development without those attenuation ponds being put in place. What we know at this point is that those attenuation ponds have been agreed, they've been approved. They are currently being built out as we speak. I don't think they're far away from being completed, but I couldn't give you a definitive date yet. So we're satisfied that we'd have relevant control over the condition for the surface water management during the construction, because they'd have to give us details of how they're going to deal with that for this specific phase before they start. And then in relation to the sort of the wider drainage, in principle, what they are saying in terms of having sustainable drainage features within the site, linking to a drainage network which will link to the attenuation ponds, in principle we have no issue. It's just because we haven't obviously been able to say that those ponds are there and they're working. This is why we haven't been able to agree those details in full at this stage. But we know that they are working towards that and that they are close to being in completion. So as long as we get confirmation of who's doing it, when they're doing it, when it's going to be completed by, as long as we're happy with those dates, then we are confident that is a reasonable sort of amount of time that whilst by the time they start, building these and the houses coming to, start being built and come into use, that those ponds would be completed. So that I think overall we're satisfied that the risk there is, is manageable, and we have obviously got then the relevant powers. If for whatever reason they're not compliant with that, we can take obviously further enforcement action if we obviously find it necessary and reasonable to do so.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jason Jordan, then Councillor Trevor Watkins.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I was just touching on what John was just said with those ponds. You know, I am really more concerned. I mean, letting this development go ahead as such until those ponds is absolutely complete and in working order, because there was a massive flood back there back in December 2020 in Landman Village. Do you mean if the buildings are starting to go ahead and starting building, and whether it is, you know, coming up to winter time now, we're going to have more significant rainfall again and more, like, you know, through this time. You know, if these ponds are not actually completed and done and actually working by the time the development's done, what sort of problems we're going to get then with flooding again around that area?
Yeah, so obviously we share those concerns to the point where we're at, you know, we're putting extra conditions on to control that. So what the second condition will say is that you know, they are not able to effectively do anything that would create potential flood risk. So laying hard, you know, laying like a finished road, hard surfaces, roads, houses, etc. They would not be able to do that until they've told us, and we've agreed in writing via a conditional discharge, that the ponds are, you know, we got the confidence of who the contractor is and when they're going to get that work by. Now, all I can say is it is within the interest, given what has happened historically, it would be within the interest of the developer to obviously make sure those ponds are in place and they are working as soon as possible, given that obviously we are now in October. But what we also know is that they are being built, they are currently being constructed. So you could reasonably, or you could say with reasonable confidence that they will be completed fairly soon. But obviously what we can't control that unless we've got this condition which says you cannot build any hard surfaces until those ponds are under completion, and obviously we agree with the timescales of their completion. So if we can't agree a reasonable timescale, if they said next summer they'll be completed, for example, and we weren't satisfied with that, then we wouldn't agree that the discharge of that condition. And then obviously we would have if they breach that, we would have enforcement powers to obviously take the relevant action as it is proportionate and necessary.
Okay, I mean, that's pretty concise.
Yeah. Also, then, sorry, Chair. You said that you don't know who's doing it or who's doing the work, but it's under construction already. So how come Newport City Council don't know who are doing it? Because you've said that it's underway, it's being constructed, it started being constructed, but we got no information. You know, we don't know who's doing it.
There will be
sorry, guys. Sorry, Chair. This is Garrett Roberts. Can I possibly just
carry on?
Yes.
Chair?
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry, Councillor Jordan. I've been involved with an enforcement investigation on Cott Hill because issues have arisen as Grant's outlined. You know, you're right to point to the flooding episode last winter, and we had concerns that this site had continued with development. You'll remember the aerial photograph from Grant's presentation. You can see that quite a significant amount of building is already being done. But the surface water attenuation ponds, which were to receive the surface water drainage from the site, were not in place. So there was nowhere for that water to go, and that was causing us problems. So we engaged in a correspondence and debate with the developer, and obviously the fact that they got their project management badly amiss was brought to their attention, that they hadn't built these ponds and they really needed them. So the works commenced and they submitted an application for reserve matters approval, which we've granted. So they have an approval in place and the works are ongoing. And to answer the question that Councillor Jordan posed, I believe it's Waters who are doing the work. And they're busy digging out these drainage basins now as we speak. That's actually led to some other side issues, which I won't bore you with, but we know they are being built. Okay, and as Grant has explained, they'll have to give us the timescales for completion of this work. And in the meantime, we think it's a safe risk that they commence development on other phases, subject to us having some understanding of when these ponds will be completed and in place. And whilst we're building the phases, we can control runoff through the construction environment management plan. So we think we've got it covered off. One, in terms of controlling water running off the site whilst they're building, and then two, in terms of where the water will go once these phases are complete. Okay, but it is a point in time issue. The ponds are being constructed, but they're not ready yet. So we're kind of on the ball, and we think we've got sufficient controls to mitigate the risk. But this is a problem of Redrow zone creation in plain terms. They needed the ponds and they didn't build them soon enough, simple as that. And we've been after them to get the ponds built, and they are currently building them. Okay, so the problem is being addressed.
Okay, I think we've got a double answer there. Thank you, Councillor Jordan. Councillor Trevor Watkins.
Two questions. The houses which are back to back, you mentioned there's 21 metres between windows. Can you bring up the drawing for that, please, Grant?
Yeah, bear with me 2 seconds, Councillor. So I am having.
Okay, I have concerns about this, Chair, in regards to this 21 metres. Is that the minimum that we're allowed between the two? That's the one.
So the 21 metres. So 21 metres is what is accepted, generally speaking, but also within our new dwellings SPG, that if there is 21 metres between two windows that directly face each other and they are both habitable rooms, so example, a bedroom facing a bedroom or a living room facing a living room, that is a sufficient space in order to protect the privacy of the occupiers of both dwellings. The 10 metres for the garden space is generally because if you sort of put a 10-metre garden here and a sort of a 10-metre garden here, I mean, that would only be 20 metres, but you're broadly there in terms of sort of meeting that separation distance. And these properties won't really have severe views into the rear of these gardens, considering that there is a sort of a 1.82 metre high close board fence in between. So 21 metres is the accepted standard for separation distances.
Okay, understand that, Grant, but what if those residents in the 10-metre one and 11.5 metre one put a further planning application in to extend their properties to the rear? That is going to make it less than the 21 metres, isn't it?
Well, yes. If it was, I mean, if it was single story, for example, you'd have your boundary treatments, which would generally protect. Yeah. If you were going 2-story, then obviously that would be subject to a further application. Yeah. So a case officer, whoever was dealing with that, would have to go out and they would have to make sure that they were satisfied there would not be any issues. What is key here is the 21 metre distance is between habitable rooms. So say, for example, it was you would like to think that whoever would design that extension would have the amenity of neighbours taken into consideration. If we weren't happy, if we thought there was a bedroom window that was facing another bedroom window at, say, 14 metres, 15 metres, then that could be a reason for refusal if we thought there'd be a harm to the impact of the neighbouring property. What you'll often find is anyone who sort of is competent in designing an extension would perhaps put maybe, I don't know, a bathroom there or something like that, which would be obscure glazed, and we could control that as non-opening, for example, the window. So ultimately it would be subject to a future application, but there are measures in place that we would have to take into consideration when assessing that application.
Okay, the other thing is, Chair, I brought up on a number of occasions about the affordable homes. Some developers will tell us, Newport City Council Planning Department, how many social housing are in that affordable homes, but some developers don't. Can we insist on that in the future? Because you've got 15 affordable homes There might not be any social housing in that, as far as I'm aware. We don't know.
Sorry, Councillor, it's Geraint Roberts again. Again, just briefly butting in. From memory, the Section 106 agreement that secures the affordable housing provision upon this site basically says they have to meet, the Welsh Government's definition of affordable housing as set out. I think there are various flavours of affordable housing. I take your point on that in terms of like staircased ownership or fully social rented and so on and so forth. But I think broadly speaking, what the Section 106 agreement requires is that the affordable provision is placed under the control of a registered social landlord and meets the definition as given in the technical advice notes that Welsh Government have issued. So we're satisfied that the affordable housing is affordable housing in a planning sense, although I agree it may allow a variety of different forms of tenure, but it is all affordable tenure so far as Welsh Government is concerned.
Okay, well, thanks for that. But I mean, Councillor Watkins, that was a can of worms question, to be honest.
Okay, I understand that. So
Yeah.
I'll have to take it up with Welsh Government, and I think to make it clear so we can get more social housing within the developments which we have. Thank you.
Well, I didn't mean it in that way.
No, know that.
Yeah, we've got Alan Lowe here, the Planning Contribution Manager. He's on call. So, Alan, could you make a contribution on that, because that's your area of speciality, obviously?
Yeah. Okay. Absolutely. Yeah. What Geraint said is correct. That's exactly right. The legal agreement sort of sets out the percentages of types of dwellings, affordable dwellings that we want, albeit that's flexible as long as both parties agree. And the other thing, I suppose, is the council has a neutral tenure policy whereby we don't actually know what type of units they are, whether they're social or shared equity, whether they're social rent or shared equity. And that generally is the relationship that's decided effectively by the relationship between the RSL and the developer. So it's down to the RSL's requirements at that time, really.
Okay. Again, I'm interested in the question. I'm also interested in the answer. Perhaps we could delegate that for a training session or sometime with the planning committee, so that we clearly understand what the requirements are, what the legalities are, and what the current policy is. And
what we as NCC can actually insist on.
Indeed.
Thank you,
Okay.
Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Jason Jordan.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's just a bit of a maybe a little bit of an update, a bit of a query actually as well, to Trevor as well, because I've questioned this before with affordable housing. Why we are social housing. I spoke to people in Newport City Council, in the home options team, and the other things like that of things. Like affordable housing is you've got to earn so much money a month to be able to have an affordable house, like the ones we've done in Newport City Homes across the road from where we live. We done an application there, and that was some of it was affordable homes. You've got to earn a certain amount of money before it's like a landlord. They give you the property as long as you're earning over so much money as a sort of explanation for social, not social housing, but
that would be one aspect of it, wouldn't it? Perhaps we should all know all the aspects and the up-to-date criteria for affordable homes. Is the point I'm making.
Yeah, it's right. Yeah, so they look at the class of affordable home if you're earning so much money.
Yeah. Okay. Well, are there any other councillor with a question? If not, are we ready to vote on this? Yeah. If I call in Pamela, then please. Can I just repeat what the recommendation is, because it's a bit long-winded, but that's how it's got to be, unfortunately. Delegated authority given to the head of regeneration, investment and housing to issue a decision to part approve with conditions, and part refuse the application on receipt of no objection from Natural Resources Wales. Okay. Committee all understand that? That recommendation is on page 66 of your paperwork. Are you prepared to vote?
Yeah, Chair, I'll propose that we accept the officer's recommendation.
So that I need a proposer and a seconder. Sorry, I'm galloping on.
Yeah, I propose, Chair, to do with officer's recommendation.
Thank you,
Second chair.
Councillor Jordan and Councillor Guy. You were seconding, were you?
Councillor Clark, I'll second.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Clark's got his mic off.
Okay, so I won't read the recommendation again. I've just read it. We all understand what it is. It's been proposed and seconded that that's the recommendation. And over to you, Pamela.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Guy, can I have your vote, please?
You're on mute, John. John, you're on mute. Sorry.
Apologies, Chair. I accept the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Guy. Yep.
Councillor Clark, please.
Accept.
Apologies, Councillor Clark, I didn't quite hear you then.
Accept.
Thank you. Councillor Watkins.
For the officer's recommendation.
Councillor Jordan.
Yeah, for the officer's recommendation.
Councillor Spencer.
Accept, yes.
Thank you. And finally yourself, please, Chair.
Yes, for the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Chair. That's a unanimous agreement with the officer's recommendations.
Thank you all for your contributions. If we could now move on to item 3 on your agenda, which is pages 71 to 74. It's application number 21-0556. The site is 23 to 24 Temple Street. The ward is Pilgwensley. Ward members Councillor Ibrahim Hyatt and Councillor Tracy Holyoke. And the presenting officer is, if I turn my page, Stephen Williams. So with you, Stephen, please.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay,
I'll just I'll share my screen. Okay, can you see my screen, Chair?
yes.
Good. The application relates to 23 and 24 Temple Street, which is a community building in Pill, and it's proposed to erect a canopy within the rear yard to provide a sheltered learning space for a children's playgroup. The application has been reported to committee as the council has a legal interest in the property. So this shows the building, the community building we're talking about, and the canopy would be proposed in the rear amenity area, which extends to the rear of these properties here, sort of dog legs in. That just gives you a different vantage point. So you can see my cursor there, that's the area where the canopy is proposed. And there, so you can see it's to the rear of these properties here, which are residential, and then backs onto Albion Close. And these are the properties in Albion Close that front onto the end of the cul-de-sac. And you can see from the photograph that the yard is enclosed with high walling. And then that's a photograph from within the yard, and this is where the canopy would go here. And you've got the floor layout, so the bird's eye view of the canopy. This is the yard here. Sorry, this is the canopy. And that would be looking at the canopy as if you were standing in Albion Close. And then that's a section showing the structure. If you were looking from where I showed you the photograph earlier. Aluminium posts and a polycarbonate roof. Maximum height is 2.9 meters. We don't think that the proposal has an adverse impact on neighbours and visually is acceptable. So we're recommending plan permission be granted. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Thank you. Committee. Committee's views, please. Anyone wish to speak? Councillor Trevor Watkins and Councillor John Guy. Councillor Watkins.
Thank you, Chair. 2 questions. The drainage from the canopy, will that be drained onto the premises or off the premises? So into the close, or will it be inside?
The drainage will be kept within the site.
Right. The other thing is, can you show me the plan or the plan of the rear close showing the wall?
From Albion Close, you mean?
Yeah, sorry.
Right, okay. I haven't got a photograph of that. I can bring up a street scene image if you wish.
Yeah.
Bear with me a minute.
You showed it just now.
Did I? Oh, sorry, okay.
You showed the Albion Close 2 properties and then...
All right, okay, you want that. Okay, fine, okay, hold on.
Well, you've gone too far.
All right, can you see that?
No, go back again, a bit far.
Yeah.
And more. And again. And again. There. Oh, not that one, that one before it. Right, is there going to be any rear access into that canopy area from the close?
No, there's no proposal to open up any access. It's going to remain enclosed.
Okay, lovely. Thank you. That's all I wanted to know.
Thank you, Councillor Watkins. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephen.
Thank you.
Councillor Guy.
Yeah, I haven't specifically got a question, but I think it's obviously something worthwhile for that particular provider there. Really, I'm prepared to make a proposal, but whether that anyone else wants to make any comments.
I've got no one listed at the minute, so if you wish to propose something, Councillor Guy, go ahead.
Chair, I propose that we accept the officer's recommendation on this planning application.
Is there a second to that, please?
Councillor
Spencer, second.
Thank you very much. Pamela, can we move to the vote, please?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Guy, please.
Paul.
Thank you. Councillor Clark.
For.
Watkins.
For the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Jordan.
Yeah, 4.
Councillor Spencer, please.
4.
And finally yourself, please, Chair.
For the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. That's a unanimous vote for the officer's recommendations.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you all very much. The final item on your agenda today are appeals decisions, which are listed on page 79. They're for information only, but does the committee agree to note?
Yeah, agree to note, Chair. It's a bit say 5 to 4 on them, really, being allowed after being refused.
Yeah.
Chair, sorry to interrupt. Can I just point out there is an error on that section of the report. So on page 79, the reference to the appeal 200552, it states appeal decision was allowed, but in fact it was dismissed.
Oh. Okay. That balances it up a bit then. Thank you very much.
Balances up, yes.
That was a late score goal. Okay. Thank you all very much for attending. Thanks for your help and contribution, and we will see you all in the very near future, hopefully. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Cheers, Chair. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Bye.